I know the old timers mined out a small section of the property and they pulled out $2 million worth of gold. So the gold here should be pretty good in spots.
Freddy Dodge had one short Alaskan season left to turn a dead claim into a fortune, or walk away as just another miner beaten by the North. In front of him, plastic tubs and metal pans were stacked with raw gold, heavy enough to bend the shelves. The rough tally was closing in on $5.8 million, from ground that most locals treated like a bad joke. And before the rest of this story is revealed, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe, because this discovery is only one of many hidden stories that are about to surface. On paper, this was the dream. A tiny crew, a forgotten valley, and more gold washing over the mats in a few weeks than many mines touch in entire years. The first test runs had looked good, then better, then unreal. Thick lines of yellow metal locked in the riffles, nuggets big enough to rattle when they hit the steel. Every cleanup pushed the total higher, while the camp filled with the smell of diesel, wet gravel, and nervous laughter. The story could have stopped there as a simple tale of risk and reward. Two men taking a chance where others saw nothing and squeezing millions out of the ground. But the valley did not only hold gold. As the excavator cut deeper and the pay streak pulled them further under the skin of the hill, strange things began to ride the conveyor belt along with the pay dirt. Old bones, dark splinters of wood shaped in ways that did not look natural, nails twisted and rusted. Nothing like the clean, modern hardware bolted onto their equipment. At first, those things went back into the tailings pile without a second thought. Gold was the only thing that mattered. Yet the finds kept coming, and the feeling around camp started to change. Jokes turned quieter. Looks lingered a little longer on anything that did not come out of the ground shining yellow. The valley had given them a fortune, but it was also giving something else. Long before the last ounce was counted, the crew understood that the most valuable thing in that valley might not be the yellow metal at all. The land was giving up a story that had been buried for centuries, and the deeper the work went, the less control anyone had over where that story was heading. Alaska is full of places that never make it onto tourists' maps. The Forgotten Valleys sat among them, a narrow strip of ground tucked between steep hills and dark timber, the kind of place only locals talked about. For more than 100 years, passing mention of it had carried the same pattern. Good gold in there, according to the old stories, but bad luck tied to every attempt. Small outfits had tried to tame it, usually late in the season when better ground was already taken. Equipment had a way of failing at the worst possible time. Partners argued and split. A few miners packed up and vanished down south, leaving behind rusted junk and unpaid fuel bills. On the surface, it sounded like nothing more than the usual chaos of frontier work. The North eats the unprepared. The weather changes without warning. A single mistake can turn a promising cut into a flooded trench or a buried machine. What made this valley different was the way locals talked about it, not with loud campfire stories, but with short comments and quick glances at the floor. The place was not just unprofitable, it was avoided. That reputation was exactly what drew Freddy Dodge and his trusted mechanic Juan toward it. While other operations fought over well-mapped claims, they looked at the old reports and saw something else. Fine gold all through the creek line, coarse gold up on the benches, enough scattered test pans from decades past to suggest that a solid pay streak might still be sitting under untouched overburden simply because no one had stayed long enough to chase it. The gamble was simple and brutal. Spend a short season grinding through unknown ground and either prove that the valley was cursed by bad rock or crack into a deposit big enough to change the story. The plan started like any other startup, a small plant tuned to capture fine gold, an excavator cutting shallow test pits across the valley floor, careful fuel management because nothing burns money faster than running an engine on dirt that does not pay. The first buckets went across the mats with low expectations. At most, the crew hoped to see a light sprinkling of color, enough to justify pushing deeper. Instead, the very first cleanup tray flashed thick streaks of bright yellow across the black-ribbed surface. It was not dust. It was not the thin shimmer that keeps broke miners hanging on. It was real, heavy gold. Each new cut followed the line of that streak. Within days, the valley that no one wanted turned into a private vault. The total climbed past hundreds of thousands, then toward 1 million. The ground answered every swing of the excavator with more metal. The only question was how long it would last and what exactly had kept others away from it for so long. The longer the work went on, the stranger the pay dirt became. Every miner expects junk in the gravel, old cans from long-forgotten camps, broken tools from earlier, quiet attempts.
At first, the crew treated the odd finds the same way. When the grizzly bars rattled and something that was not rock bounced off and clanged into the side chute, it usually went straight back into the tailings pile. Still, patterns have a way of forcing attention. The bones that turned up in the slurry were not from moose or caribou. They were old, dry, and fragile, stained dark by time. The wood that surfaced did not look like driftwood or random roots. Some pieces carried clean, straight edges, as if they had once been part of beams or posts cut with tools, not teeth or frost. The nails were the hardest to ignore. They were long and square, hand-forged, twisted and corroded into rough spikes. They did not match the common frontier tools found near old cabins. Elders in a nearby village were shown the buckle and the axe. The response was quiet, not surprised. Old stories in the region spoke of strangers who came from the sea before the big rushes. Men who wore strange metal, carved strange signs, and left trouble in their wake. According to those stories, they moved inland following metal, bright stones, and rivers, and some never came back out. That valley sat along one of those paths. With each new artifact, the gold in the tubs became only part of the story. The ground was starting to return more than money. It was returning memory.
Once the artifacts began to surface, everyone on site started watching the monitors a little closer and the cut walls a little longer. The gold was still unreal. Nuggets poured off the shaker deck, and the fine gold in the concentrates promised a record season. But the feeling that the crew was digging through someone else's history grew stronger every day. Then the excavator bucket bit into something that felt wrong, in a way no amount of gold could smooth over. Instead of crumbling gravel or frozen clay, the teeth dragged hard across a smooth, straight edge. The operator eased back, and the crew moved in with shovels and hands, scratching away the mud. What appeared beneath the surface did not look like natural formation. Dark timbers emerged, squared off and stacked in lines. The more they dug, the clearer the shape became. A rectangle of hand-cut logs fitted together like a roof laid horizontally in the ground. Miners know that nature does not build straight and square like that. This was structure, not accident. Careful work exposed a corner that could be pried open. When the first log shifted, a breath of old air spilled out, colder than the outside temperature and heavy with the stillness of long confinement. The space underneath was small, barely room for a couple of people to crouch. Headlamps flicked over rough stone walls braced by the same cut timbers. On the dirt floor lay broken pieces of pottery, smeared with traces of dull color that hinted at once bright paint. Clusters of those same square hand-forged nails were scattered near one wall, as if someone had been storing them or pulling them from boards. What halted every movement in the chamber was not the pottery and not the nails. It was the carvings on the inner stone. Lines had been cut into the rock with patient effort. Some formed simple crosses. Others branched into straight and angled strokes, an alphabet that did not match English, Russian, or any local script. The shapes looked almost identical to runes seen in books about Norse explorers, with a crude cross cut beside them, as if different worlds of belief had collided in one cramped room. The idea that medieval European sailors or traders had pushed this far into Alaska has long lived on the fringe of historical theory. Most accepted history places confirmed Norse sites on the Atlantic side of the continent, and notes that no widely accepted Viking settlement has been found in Alaska. That was the frame most people carried in their heads. Yet the chamber, the buckle with knotwork, the axe, the rune-like carvings, and the cross all sat in one spot under active gold ground, preserved in the cold soil, as if waiting for someone reckless enough to cut into them. For Freddy and Juan, the discovery changed the entire feel of the job. The valley no longer seemed like an empty resource waiting to be mined. It felt occupied, not by living people, but by events that had never been finished properly. From that moment on, every shovelful of pay dirt had a second weight, the weight of a question. Who had built that chamber, and how had they reached this place, and why had the land worked so hard to hide them?
The correct response, after finding an ancient chamber under an active mine, would have been to shut everything down and wait for experts to take over. In real life, decisions often have to answer to fuel bills, payroll, and short seasons. The gold was still flowing at a rate that most miners only see on television, and the clock on the weather was always ticking. Work continued, but with a different energy. Historians and archaeologists were contacted, and some made the rough trip out. Skepticism softened as soon as they saw the artifacts lined up on a plywood table. the photos of the carvings in the chamber, and the exposed timbers under the cut. Carbon dating early samples suggested ages that did not fit neatly into the known arrival dates for later European activity in that region. Each test result added another piece to a puzzle that reached far beyond one season's profit. On the mining side, the valley responded to this intrusion by changing its own rhythm. Machines that had run smooth for weeks began to suffer from strange failures. Hydraulic hoses, checked and double-checked, burst under normal pressure. Engines that had received fresh fuel and filters stalled without clear cause. Electrical systems in the plant glitched, cutting power to key parts of the process without blowing obvious fuses. Juan, who had built a reputation fixing other miners' disasters, found no satisfying pattern in the breakdowns. One problem would be solved, only for another to appear in a part of the system that had never given trouble before. Each repair took time away from running pay dirt. Each unexpected stoppage cut into production and into nerves. The tension peaked when a cut wall let go during routine digging. A slab of earth slid toward the trench, knocking a worker off balance and partially burying his legs. Quick action and solid safety practice kept the incident from turning into a tragedy, but the message was impossible to ignore. The valley was unpredictable ground. That could be explained in purely practical terms. Permafrost and thawed zones mix, water travels under the surface, stress builds in unseen ways. At the same time, the string of events matched the old whispers a little too neatly for comfort. Around camp, the phrase "curse of the valley" came up more often, half joking and half serious. Night brought another layer. Small items left on tables were found in different places at dawn, even when the wind was calm and the camp was quiet. Security cameras aimed at the cut and the chamber area sometimes caught pale orbs drifting through frame, light without a clear source. In the dark, with generators off and only a few dim bulbs burning, some crew members reported the faint sense of voices under the wind, not loud enough to form words, but distinct enough to feel like more than imagination. Through it all, the gold count kept rising. A single haul added another $1.7 million to the total. The valley was paying out, but every out seemed to drag along a little more strain, a little more unease, as if the place wanted to make sure that fortune and discomfort stayed locked together.
The final turning point came without warning. By that stage of the season, the chamber entrance had become a quiet landmark at the edge of the work zone. Specialists moved in and out with measuring tools and cameras. The mining crew kept their distance unless help was requested. One evening, as the sky dimmed into the long Alaskan twilight, a deep vibration rolled through the ground. It was not the sharp crack of blasting or the dull rumble of distant thunder. It was a slow, spreading groan that seemed to start under the hill itself. The soil around the chamber entrance shifted. Small rocks tumbled first, then larger chunks. Before anyone could stabilize the slope, a section of the hillside gave way. Earth, broken timbers, and rock poured into the opening, filling the access tunnel in seconds. Dust and cold vapor billowed out, then settled into a heavy silence. A quick head count confirmed that no one had been in the chamber when the collapse happened. Relief mixed with the realization that the buried room was now sealed behind tons of unstable material. The chance to document every detail carefully had been cut short in a single movement of the ground. For Freddy, the sight of the blocked entrance changed the way the entire project felt. The numbers on the whiteboard still told a story of rare success. $5.8 million in gold from a valley that others had walked away from in disappointment or fear. Yet the closed chamber made the camp feel less like a mine and more like a gravesite. The elders who had warned that the valley remembered visitors from long ago now seemed less like storytellers and more like people repeating hard-learned lessons. Continuing to chase every last ounce did not make sense anymore. The season was already strong beyond expectation. The risks were mounting in ways that had nothing to do with simple bad weather or mechanical wear. Equipment was slowly shut down, cleaned, and prepped for storage. Plans shifted from expansion to safe exit. Archaeologists took what samples they could from the fallen slope and from the artifacts already removed, knowing that the heart of the chamber would likely remain untouched for the near future. Snow would soon start to creep down the hillsides, and the valley would once again be covered by ice and silence. What remained was a strange balance sheet. On one side sat millions in clean gold, proof that forgotten ground can still hold life-changing wealth. On the other side sat broken hoses, close calls, strange nights, and a sealed room that hinted at visitors who may have stood in that same valley hundreds of years earlier, chasing their own version of fortune and paying their own price for disturbing the land. When the season finally ended and the last gold was weighed, the story of the Forgotten Valley did not stop at the edge of the claim. News of the $5.8 million haul spread quickly through mining circles and into public media. On its own, that number would already put the operation in rare company. Most small crews never see that much value flow across their sluice boxes in a lifetime. But what truly pushed this story into legend territory were the questions left buried under that collapsed chamber. Alaska has always been a place where fact and myth blend. The history of the region is filled with dramatic rushes, like the stampede to the Klondike, where tens of thousands of hopeful miners clawed their way north in search of gold, and many never made it back. Tales of lost mines, cursed claims, and strange visitors have floated around camps for more than a century. Most of the time, those stories stay in the realm of late-night talk and tall tales. The Valley case had more weight than that. It had physical evidence. There were the artifacts lifted out of the cuts before the slide, laid out on tables under harsh work lights, the serpent buckle with its endless loop, the brutal axe head blackened by time, the square nails, the pottery shards with faded designs, the bronze pendant etched with a pattern like a compass, and the small ivory figure with wide staring eyes and a crown of lines that looked like rays. There were lab reports from carbon dating that pointed toward dates far earlier than the well-documented arrival of later traders, missionaries, and prospectors. There were photographs and notes from the short window when the chamber walls had been visible, showing the rune-like characters next to the rough cross. Put together, these pieces formed a picture that seemed to push accepted timelines to their edges. One possible reading of the evidence suggested that a small group of European sailors or explorers, perhaps even with Norse roots, had found their way into this part of Alaska long before it appeared in most history books. Another reading saw a blend of influences, with artifacts traded, lost, and reused over generations, creating a layered record that is hard to untangle. There was also a colder, simpler explanation. In a world where television shows and sponsorship deals can keep a mine afloat as surely as a rich pay streak, stories have value. A dramatic narrative wrapped around a real gold discovery can attract attention, funding, and fame. In that view, the valley might have held some real old objects and a healthy amount of gold, and the rest of the tale may have been shaped and polished for cameras and headlines. Without full access to the chamber, no final answer appears. The truth likely sits somewhere between extremes, a mix of real finds, real risk, and storytelling instincts. What cannot be denied is the power of the legend that grew out of that lonely cut in the hills. It speaks to something deep in anyone who hears it, a mix of greed, curiosity, and fear. There is the temptation of a ground that can turn a struggling crew into millionaires in one short season. There is the eerie feeling of walking over the footsteps of people whose names never made it into any book. And there is the reminder that some places do not give up their secrets without sending a warning first. As long as that chamber remains sealed, the Forgotten Valley sits halfway between history and myth. A place where gold, ghosts, and human ambition all lie tangled under the same thin layer of moss and gravel. Viewers who want to follow more stories like this, where real discoveries collide with mystery and hard questions, can subscribe to Gold Era 2.0 so new deep dives into the hidden side of gold and history never get missed.